We return for a final pre-trial Karen Read round 2 update. So the opening statements for trial 2 for Karen Read start Tuesday, April 22nd. Today, as I film this and hopefully put it up for you guys to watch, is April 18th, which is a Friday right before the trial begins. And there was some final pop-offs that happened. Now, Prosecutor Brennan, who was the special prosecutor who was brought on for round 2, this man is professional reacher. He can grasp at straws with the best of them. So his reach for this week was that he argued that the defense was trying to trial by ambush the prosecution, with the defense bringing out a new report from the ARCA experts. If you haven't been keeping up, ARCA were the biomedical engineers who were hired for the federal investigation last year that just wrapped up a couple months ago. And they made some mechanic things. They were trying to recreate the scene, redo the physics. They created a cannon that would accurately shoot a glass at a taillight to see if it would break and what the force was. They were affectionately called the Crash Daddies in the Emily D. Baker chat. And we are in it for them. So excited to have them back. But they had a new report because they are also going to be rebuttal witnesses against the newly attained prosecution expert, Dr. Welchens. Dr. Welchens is the expert who was recently allowed in to make opinions about John O'Keefe's, the victim's, injuries. He had some arm injuries. I believe it was on his right arm, actually. But he has some interesting wound patterns that has been speculated to be dog bite wounds. And the prosecution is saying, no, there was a broken taillight that he scratched his arm on when he was hit by Karen Read. And the ARCA experts in the federal investigation and in the first trial, when they were brought on by Alan Jackson, they said, we couldn't recreate the scene. We couldn't pick up what the prosecution was putting down. The physics didn't physics. The gravity didn't do what they said the gravity did. And the prosecution obviously doesn't want that kind of testimony coming in. They don't want biomedical engineers saying that what they claimed happened physically wasn't possible. They don't want that. So Prosecutor Brennan tried to keep the ARCA out. He wasn't able to keep ARCA out. There was some argument about whether they got paid or not. That was already sorted. I'll link that below. That already happened. And now he's saying that there's a new report and it's not fair. They can't be allowed in. They can't testify to this stuff. He does not want their extended opinion to be allowed in because it was an ambush. At the last minute, right before opening statements are supposed to happen, the defense drops this on his lap. Absolutely not, said Prosecutor Brennan. And he was up against the Spitfire that is Alan Jackson, who said he's feigning his unhappiness, which Judge Canone already doesn't like Alan Jackson and really doesn't like his sass and dramatics. And he brought it still. He was like, this man is feigning his disappointment and whatever illusions he has going on. And because it's just the timeline of how things got out. You just allowed this Dr. Welchens expert witness in, and he's going to go, and he's not a medical doctor. And that was a really big thing. ARCA originally was not allowed by Judge Canone to make opinions about John O'Keefe's injuries because they were not licensed medical doctors. And she said that according to state laws, only licensed medical doctors could make such opinions. Well, Dr. Welchens is going to be allowed in as an expert to make those opinions, and he is not a licensed medical doctor. So the defense was like, oh, we feel like that door has been opened, Your Honor. And Judge Canone was like, yeah. And the prosecution is like, oh no. And so he was like, he slammed his man. Brennan was like, no. And that slam on the podium ended up being completely in vain. Yeah, that really happened. He was like, "It is an ambush, Your Honor." And she declared that there wasn't an ambush. The defense said, "We turned everything over as we got it, but you didn't get your expert approved and their report out until here. We had to send it to our people. Our people got their report here, and we sent it back here. It's just how time works. We can't go back in time and give it to you after we had it, until after we had it." So that was a thing that happened, and that was most of the final motions in limine, was just Brennan reaching for straws with that. And me and several other people who I've watched on the internet, we have this agreement where Prosecutor Brennan, Mr. Brennan, if your entire case, your entire ship is going to sink because of ARCA's arguments and rebuttals to your witnesses, you shouldn't have set sail on this case. You should have dismissed it. Because the prosecution is not there to counter the defense. That's not what they're supposed to be there for. The prosecution goes, "We have a strong case, we have witnesses, we have this evidence, we have this, we present this, boom, conviction." That is what is supposed to happen. The defense doesn't have to prove crap. They're not there to prove anything. They are not there to defend the innocence of their defendant. They're there to protect constitutional rights and poke holes in whatever the prosecution says. So it's like, if the prosecution goes, "This witness said this, they saw it happen, so it happened," and the defense can go, "This witness is blind and has these other issues, you shouldn't believe what they say." They're there to poke holes. And if you really think that just ARCA alone, like, they're two dudes who are allowed to testify, if you really think that these two expert witnesses' things are going to be enough to sink your ship, your case isn't strong enough. In my humble, unprofessional opinion. Tell me what you think about that. So, what else happened was that the defense had argued that they wanted some more motions about 4 of the officers that were involved. Their main one was Kevin Alberts. Kevin Alberts was this outside character. He was not brought in as a witness before. There were some testimony things that they wanted brought in and expanded upon. They were able to iron out most of the details with the prosecution during a break, which is nice, but they still wanted to argue about that, and there was less of a time concern with it because whatever Kevin Alberts had to say is not going to be a main part of opening statements, so it's not going to be a make or break for an argument there. And then there was also the other big thing that happened was Turtleboy. For those of you who don't know who Turtleboy is, that is his Twitch handle and his media handle. And he is a journalist, an investigative journalist in Massachusetts. And he has been charged with witness intimidation in the Karen Reed case. Now, his attorneys are going, he's not intimidating witnesses. He asked Jen McCabe and the Alberts and stuff. He tried to ask them questions and, get their statements and opinions. And he was a pest, like journalists tend to be. Like, "Hey, can you tell me about this? Why did you say this? Why did you do that?" And they claimed that he was, they wanted him arrested and had him charged. He is not convicted. His trial is ongoing at the same time as the Karen Reed trial. Oh, my peaches. About whether he was intimidating or trying to intimidate and harass witnesses in the Karen Reed trial. He has been following the case since the beginning, and he has been accused of being a main driving force in the online harassment and accusations that the Alberts and McCabe's have been receiving and the public outrage against them. So he has his own case going on, but because he's been, covering the case, he wants to be able to sit in trial. And prosecutor Brennan wanted him fully sequestered, as in not allowed in, because he was going to be a witness. He was going to call Turtleboy as a witness. But then Turtleboy ended up pleading the fifth, and Brennan and the attorney for Aiden Kearney, that's Turtleboy's name, he said, my client's going to plead the fifth. And Brennan was like, oh, no. He's going to take an oath. I want to hear him from his mouth say that he's going to plead the fifth. Now, plead the fifth does not automatically mean, oh, I don't want to be, protection of incrimination of self. That means I'm automatically guilty. We use that in context all the time, where if you plead the fifth, then you're automatically guilty. That's not actually how it works. Pleading the fifth is a combination of a right to remain silent and a right not to be cross-examined. And because he has his own ongoing case, he had to plead the fifth because he can't be cross-examined on a case that isn't his. He's not a defendant in the case. And in order for him to be cross-examined or made as a hostile witness, he would have to also be called by the defense. And that wasn't going to happen. So he pled the fifth, and he is only going to be excluded from the courtroom. He can still watch the trial, but he's only going to be excluded during the testimony of, I think, Jen McCabe, Matt McCabe, Allison McCabe, Colin Alberts, Kevin Alberts, and Nicole Albert. I think those are, and former Trooper Proctor. And yeah, and then they were told to kind of outline how their opening statements were roughly going to go, how long they planned on taking, all that stuff. And the way I interpreted what's going to happen is that the defense is going to take the stance of, Karen Read didn't do it. Here are third-party culprits. So here are other people who had a much better chance, opportunity, and motive to do it. It wasn't her. She's being framed and set up. She was targeted, which has been their thing since the beginning. And they're also going to be going double down on the Bowden defense. The Bowden defense is saying the investigation was botched, that there were other people, and this ties into the third-party culprit, that if the investigation would have been done better, if there was a higher quality investigation, if they would have done a better job, put in more effort, then they would have been able to get more evidence and looked into other people more. And instead, they just pinned one person, went that route, and didn't look at anything else. And they want to say that because the investigation was so poorly done, that the prosecution can't prove my defendant they can't prove anything. This investigation was a wash job. And to kind of parry that, the prosecution seems to be going down the line of not only going with proving guilt with Karen Read's outside statements, but they're going to be basically throwing Trooper Proctor under the bus. Now, I don't know how soon that particular thing was made, because it wasn't until a few months ago that the internal investigation was concluded for former Trooper Proctor, and he was dismissed from his position. He had to resign from the department. He is no longer allowed to be a law officer because of his misconduct, his unprofessionalism. And I think that the prosecution, based on what they were saying, they're going to use that. They're going to go, the entire investigation wasn't a crapshoot. This particular investigator, the lead investigator, everyone else had to follow his orders. Everyone else had to go off of what he said and allowed. He's the problem. And he's already been sorted. He's fired. He's not going to be involved anymore. But that doesn't mean that everything was wrong. He could have done things better. He could have made better orders. He could have behaved and conducted himself better. But that doesn't mean everyone else is wrong, you know? So they're really seeming like they're going to make former Trooper Proctor the fall guy, because they can. He got fired for his behavior and misconduct. So when he's the lead investigator, it's going to be easy to say, for the defense to go, the whole investigation was botched because check out what the lead investigator did, and he already didn't look good in the first trial, which led to the internal investigation to begin with. And then, since he was fired, the prosecution's going to be able to go, this one guy did some wrong things. But that doesn't mean the defendant isn't guilty. It could have been done better on his part, but everything wasn't wrong. You can't dismiss everything else because of this one guy. So I really think that they're going to go with that route. That seems to be what's going on. I most look forward to a good handful of people. I'm going to do another thing saying who I'm excited about and why for witness testimony. And I will see you all in the next one. And let's get ready for trial round 2. I want truth. I want justice. I want some resolutions for John O'Keefe, for his family, for Karen Reed, and just for everybody. Everybody's ready to be done. And so we'll see, hopefully with Prosecutor Brennan, he's been able to move things along pretty quickly, and I don't think he's going to harp on, did it snow? He might, the investigators might, they might blame everything on the snow. They did a lot of snow blaming in the first trial, so I imagine we'll see a little bit of that, but hopefully not to the extent of the first trial. All right, we'll just have to see what happens together. I will be doing weekly updates with any important things will be in the related shorts, and I will see you for all of that. Bye, my lovely humans. I still haven't learned to stop it, though.